please welcome co-founder and CEO of GitHub, Chris Wanstrath.
Hello! Hello, everybody! Welcome to GitHub Universe. This is absolutely incredible. We've been talking about doing this for such a long time. It's really a dream come true. So thank you for joining us in this amazingly weird and incredible space that somehow turned into a great conference venue. So we're here to talk a lot about GitHub today. Welcome to our first developer conference focused on Octocats and getting Octocats together. No, not really. I mean, this is a conference with GitHub in the name. There's Octocats everywhere. But really, this is about you. GitHub is all about developers. It's all about people. It's all about building things for people using them. And over the next 2 days, we're going to talk a lot about building, collaborating on, and deploying software. What's interesting is we've been doing this now for about 8 years, and this is the same thing we've been talking about the whole time. We've always been interested in building software and collaborating on it and deploying it, but what we talk about and how we talk about it continues to change. Now, software development, as we all know, is a very rapidly evolving practice, and so that's why we're here. There's a lot of knowledge that we all gain on our own that we can share with each other. There's a lot of tricks and hacks that we figure out that we can learn from and give to the broader community. And there's a lot of cool people that are doing really interesting stuff. So we're really happy that you made the time to come here. And before I really start, I really wanted to give a huge, huge thank you to all of the speakers and everyone that helped make this conference possible. So thank you, Universe team, and thank you, speakers, very much. So this is not our logo right now. Some of you may remember this. This was one of our original logos. We went through a couple different variations. Our first tagline was social Git hosting, which is like absolutely incredible, right? Everyone loved that. It really rolls off the tongue. But eventually we landed on this idea of social coding. We realized hosting isn't interesting, and while Git is really cool, the Git part isn't what makes GitHub special. It's really about people. It's really about people working together to build software. And if any of you have ever experienced the pain of trying to learn Git as a new user, you know a lot of people join GitHub in spite of Git, right? There's something about working with other people, sharing ideas, that's just so powerful that you'll learn any tool or go through any pain to get there. Luckily, that's maybe more true 8 years ago about Git being painful than it is today, and we're going to talk about that. But the point is, we've always been focused on people working together to build software, on the developers, on the software development experience. And that's been reflected in our logos, in our mascot, in our development, in our open source, and in our conference. So that's what we're going to talk a lot about today. So originally, this is our timeline. There's only 3 things that happened. But this is our timeline of roughly the history of GitHub. And so, when we started GitHub, like I said, we really wanted to add a social layer on top of version control, on top of collaboration. We didn't use those words. What we really wanted was just an easier way to share code and get things done. What we ended up with was this amazing social coding experience. But at the beginning, we only targeted individuals. So the original GitHub had no concept of organizations or groups or companies. It really was a social network in the sense of you had to sign up, you had your own account, you shared software on your own account. That was what we envisioned. We envisioned just a bunch of people using this site to share code and work together. But when you are focused on users, on customers, on developers, you have to get really good at listening. And you don't have to be that good at listening to hear the overwhelming feedback that, what the hell are you doing? I need to use this for my company. Please don't make me pass around my boss's user login that's not very secure. So we decided that's a great point. We don't want people to pass around user logins to share their code. There's probably a better way. And really, that came from you. That came from people saying, we really like this GitHub thing. We, at first, thought this would be a good way for us to share code snippets and little projects, but it's turning into a great way to work together with teams, both open source, nonprofits, and corporations. So in 2010, about 2 years after we launched GitHub, we rolled out this feature called Organizations, which let groups of people work together for the first time on GitHub. And we've been improving that ever since. In fact, there's been a dramatic increase in improvements to organizations recently. CC yesterday, we brought out some really awesome ways to work better together with teams and know who's in your organization and have more control over who's seeing what. But we launched Organizations, and we were like, OK, y'all are happy now, right? And everyone was like, no, that's not what we asked for, right? This is not what I need. We would meet people at conferences that worked for a small government or a school or a major bank, and they would tell us, I love GitHub, I love using pull requests, I love sharing open source, but I'm not allowed to use this inside my company. we have some bureaucracy, or I work for the government, or I work for something doing with secure sort of financial software, I can't put my code in the cloud. So what we thought was, well, the cloud is the future, but GitHub is right now. So why don't we find a way to help people work better together in any environment they're in? And this really comes from the fact that GitHub is born out of open source. We were built on top of Git. From the very beginning, we worked with the Git community, we contributed to the Git community, and an amazing thing about the Git community is how diverse it is. There are so many different tools, there are so many different applications, there are so many different ways to use Git, interact with Git, and that meant that the day we launched GitHub, there were a million different tools you could use. So that was sort of guiding our philosophy of, well, we can be opinionated and say the cloud is the only way to build software, but we realized that there are a lot of different ways to build software, and what we care most about is helping you get your job done. And I don't know how to fight the corporate bureaucracy yet to get your code into the cloud. We're working on that, but we do know how to ship a piece of software that you can run behind your firewall. So around 2012, we released GitHub Enterprise, which let you collaborate behind the firewall, and we've been working really hard on that ever since. But an important thing about GitHub is we come from this ecosystem. We are, at the core, closed source. We participate in tons of open source and love the open source community, and we don't think it's either or. We think it's a mix of both. And that's really where our focus is going into the future. We've been talking a lot about enterprise over the last couple years. We're going to continue to talk a lot about it. We're going to talk a lot about open source in the next 2 days and beyond, but it's not open source versus enterprise anymore. And I think all of us know this or are realizing this. It's very much about open source and enterprise. That's the world that we grew up in, that's the world that we came from, and that's rapidly becoming the world that everyone is living in, which is really exciting for those of us that are open source fans that have worked in companies and benefited tremendously from the work of people putting stuff out there for free and built huge companies on it. It's really, really amazing. But it's not because of us. This is just the way the world is moving. It's not open versus closed. It's open and closed. So when we started GitHub, it was 2 people. And now there are 11 million people that have signed up for GitHub accounts, which is pretty incredible. It's really blown us away. Thank you. It's all you. Claps to you, right? You all signed up. I hope everyone has a GitHub account. But it's just absolutely amazing for a number of reasons, right? When you're starting a side project to help you build code better together, you're not thinking about 11 million people. I don't even know what that number means, right? You're just thinking about trying to get your life to be a little bit better, a little bit easier. Apparently that's caught on. And it's not just developers. It's not just people in San Francisco that are building Ruby on Rails apps, which is the community I came from. It's kids, it's teachers, scientists, it's governments now, of all things. Governments are being very progressive in terms of technology. SREs at Google, DevOps people, authors writing books. The word developer is changing, right? Some will say that there are 20 million developers in the world. There's no way half of them have GitHub accounts. Right? There's no way that we are over half of the development community. I just don't believe that. I think there are way more than 20 million developers out there, and that's because we can't define the word developer the way we defined it 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Yeah, there are maybe 20 million people that are 1999-style programming engineers employed at companies, sure. But developers, journalists that are writing code to support their articles, scientists that are writing code to go through data, there are so many more of these people in the world than we even realize, and that number is only going to get bigger in the future. So this is an amazing number for us. But recently we started thinking, what is GitHub? In our company, in GitHub, we use it a lot. We love the pull request. For many of us, the pull request is the focal point of GitHub. But when we start asking people, what is GitHub to you, we realize it means something different to everyone. Some people love the pull request. Some people love the open source community. Some people love that they can use this software behind their firewall. Some people love GitHub Pages, free static site hosting. So we looked at that and we said, this community is bigger than 11 million people, and there are more than 11 million people using GitHub. So how many are there? So we undertook this large enterprise, this big project where we logged into Google Analytics, and we looked at how many people use our website. And it turns out 36 million unique people visit GitHub every single month. So this community is way bigger than the people that have signed up for accounts. It's way bigger than whatever number 20 million comes from. There are 36 million people downloading your code, reading your documentation, playing with your video game that you publish to GitHub Pages every single month, and this number is rising rapidly. The point being that none of us have any idea how big software has become because it's moving so quickly. 20 million may have been an accurate number a couple years ago, and if it was, it's completely blown away by now, and it's only going to get bigger in the future. This is our new logo. It's kind of the same. The Octocat is less, it's twinkly now. It's a little bit more friendly. We've had some tweaks done to it. But At the end of the day, despite the fact that there's some big numbers that I'm not sure I even understand, the focus of GitHub has always been you, the individual, the developer, trying to make your development experience a little bit better, a little bit easier, a little bit less painful, particularly when we know a lot of us are spending all day fighting with computers, right? It's nice to have a little Octocat that you know has your back. So because this is a keynote and because this is a GitHub conference, I want to talk about some of the things that we've done over the past year at GitHub that you may or may not have heard of. And I think this is the part where I'm supposed to talk about all the big splashy launches that we've done. But I think that at our company, we really care about details. Details are really what makes or break a great product experience. And a broad example of that is Uncanny Valley, right? If you've seen this, there's a point at which a cartoon face starts to look creepy because it's too close to a human face, but not a human face, right? Because of the details. Your subconscious, you're always looking at and understanding and feeling the details, even if maybe you can't express what they are. So when we talk about you making your life better, making your workflow better, pull requests being great, we're talking about little details that add up to create a better experience. So this is something that we shipped recently called protected branches. So now you have way more control over when and why a pull request gets merged. You can hook up things like CI to say you can't merge this pull request until CI passes, which basically gives you a huge safety net. But because this is an API, you can use it for all sorts of things. You can use it for CLAs. You can use it for hooking into another system that maybe has a process or needs some sort of sign-off. It doesn't matter. We want to help make your workflow easier. And the less you have to go to a separate document to use a checklist, and the more it's built right into GitHub, the more it's just part of the way you work, the better we think that experience could be. Quick pulls. We are big fans of this concept called GitHub Flow, and it's really what I'm talking about. It's the developer experience. It's cutting out all the friction. It's cutting out all the steps. It's letting you focus on the work you're doing and not the work you have to do in order to get there, right? It's not about configuring your text editor or your terminal. It's about writing code and thinking about hard problems. Quick pulls are a way to very easily, from editing a file, launch into a pull request. It's just a nice, simple flow thing that we've done, but it really embodies the spirit of what we're trying to do, which is just remove friction and make it way easier for you to get on with your day. So attach files, controversial feature. I know, you can now attach files to issues. Look, not everything needs to be in Git. In fact, there are some things I put in Git that I regret putting in Git. Not everything should be in version control. Sometimes you just want to quickly share a file, quickly share a photo, quickly share an idea. We want to make that really easy for you, and that's now built into issues. And then, does anyone use split diffs? Does anyone ever use this? This is amazing, right? So design is a difficult thing, and I'm sure there's a ton of designers here that could talk at length that have way more experience than me. But one of the beautiful things about development and the development community is the diversity in every sense of the word. We all have our own favorite text editor. We all have our own config file. We all have our own keyboard shortcuts. That's not a bug. That's a feature. So this is another thing here. We have, for a long time, only used unified diffs. And we had the opinion, some of us, myself included, that this was a better way to view diffs. In reality, we all work differently. And what we want to do is provide options that help you work best. So split diffs were a long time coming, and maybe a small feature, but to me, again, it embodies this idea of the details matter, and we want to go to you, to where you work, to help you work better. And if you think better in a split diff way, or want to jump between the two of them, we want to be there for you. OK, we also did have some splashy launches, so I am going to talk about those. All right, so GitHub Desktop is something we released recently. I don't know if anyone's tried it. For a while, we had a Mac application and a Windows application. We put them together into one application called GitHub Desktop now, and it should be the quickest way to make a pull request. And really, my pitch to someone is, try it. If you already know Git, if you already love your workflow, just give it a shot. It may not be for you. But if you're trying to bring someone into collaboration with you, if you want to add someone to your team, if you're trying to teach someone GitHub, Git can be hard to use, right? And so you can say download GitHub Desktop, or you can teach them how to use Git. And really, I think the first one's a lot easier to say. Shows them what the value of collaboration, the power of using Git and GitHub, and can either be a stepping stone to a more powerful Git workflow, or it can be just the thing that you use every single day to collaborate with everyone else on your team. Again, we want to provide as many different options there are for you, whether it's integration into something like Sublime or Atom, a standalone GitHub Desktop client, or support for Git. We are big fans of the Git project. There was a major release recently that we blogged about. We like the options, we like the choice, and we want to support as many different choices as we can. So GitHub Enterprise I talked a little bit about. We launched 2.0 last November, which was a huge undertaking, and we did a really, really awesome job of it, I think. The company did an amazing, amazing job. The customers seem to really like it. We want to make great on-prem software. If you need to work behind a firewall, we want that to work really well for you. So we're now up to 2.3, and we're getting way better every day at how we release, work with customers, and manage GitHub Enterprise. And a part of that is not just saying, download a VM. Maybe you want to run on AWS. We now have enterprise support for that, which we launched last year. Maybe you want to run on Azure or any one of the number of clouds out there. We did a launch earlier this year with Microsoft where we unveiled Enterprise on Azure. And, pinch me, I'm dreaming, we have GitHub built in Visual Studio now as an open source plugin supported by Microsoft, right? That is absolutely incredible. So now, if you want to use GitHub from within Visual Studio, all you need to do is download Visual Studio. It's there. You can install it by default. You can look at the code. It's on open source. We're collaborating with Microsoft. It's really amazing, and I'm a huge fan of Microsoft these days. So good work, everyone. It feels very weird saying that as a person that came from the Linux world, but we are in a new age. Like I'm saying, things are changing faster than we may even realize. So the Student Developer Pack is something else we did that I'm really, really in awe of. So when I was in college, is anyone here from Adobe? All right, I used to pirate Photoshop, OK? Like, when I was in college, I would just steal software. And I'm sure, don't quote me on that. Why? It's because I couldn't afford Photoshop. I would have paid for it. I would have liked to have paid for it. I support it. It's a great piece of software. I could easily afford BitTorrent, right? It's a lot harder to torrent GitHub. It's a lot harder to torrent GitHub. But we still want to give that to students. We still want kids to use professional-grade tools, the same thing that engineers at NASA and Facebook are using. So the Student Developer Pack is our way to do that. We have over 250,000 students that have signed up to this pack, and they get free GitHub. But that's not all. We have Stripe. We have DigitalOcean. The same tools that you use either at a hackathon or to build your massive company, kids can now use for free. They're learning the same tools. It's really quite amazing. And then Atom. Does anyone use Atom? It's cool. Yeah, all right. Big fan of Atom. I mean, what is more core to the developer experience than the text editor? That's rhetorical. Don't answer. We could probably go a couple of different ways. But the text editor, right? The thing that you don't use to edit text, the thing you use to write code, the text editor, it's the cornerstone. It's the stepping stone. It's the first thing you use. It shows you the insides, right? It helps you tinker. Atom, for us, is a huge, huge project and a very important milestone and core to our business. We want to have your development experience first, and we want to be able to take your feedback and make that better. And so there's one way to do that, which is a great support team and working with customers. And there's another way to do that, which is making it totally open source and free. So Atom is free. It's open source. It has a thriving community. You can write plugins for it. It's all built using web technologies. And there's already some incredible, amazing things that have come out of Atom, like the Electron project. So there's actually a project that powers Atom that allows you to build native applications in web technologies that we released, that we support, now is being used by Slack, by Facebook, by Microsoft. It's really incredible what's going on. And for us, it's really amazing to see Atom take off to over hundreds of thousands of active users every month already, and a lot of people that use it and love it, myself included. All right, so those are some of the big things we've done. If you haven't checked out Atom or Enterprise or Student Developer Pack, I highly encourage you to do so. They're pretty awesome. But it also would not be a keynote if I did not announce something new. So I have some new stuff to talk about. So this is the first one. This is probably one of the most requested features in the history of, I'm just going to say the universe, because we're at Universe, right? Large file support for Git and GitHub. You want to use Git and GitHub with massive files, either graphic files, terabyte large files, PDFs, data sets, or just like a big image, right? It's been a huge problem. Git has never been good at that due to some of the, it's a trade-off that the Git community made. Git is very strong at some things, but what you don't get is the large file support. However, we've been working very hard on creating an open source project called Git LFS and integrating it into GitHub. And we're very happy to announce today the public availability of Git LFS for GitHub users. So after this talk, you can go to the blog post. You can read more about it. You can download the software. You can enable it for your organization. And now you can throw anything you want. Just give us your database dumps, huge files, like your family photos. No, don't do that. I'm kidding. But now you can store large files in Git and GitHub with ease. And it's not just us. There's going to be a session on this later today. We're working with Atlassian on this. We're working with Microsoft on this. We're really, really excited about this feature. We really believe in the Git ecosystem. We think this is going to be a huge, huge part of it. So check it out. It's generally available today. Really excited about that. We've been working on it for a long time. Yeah. All right, number 2. So you probably have seen this, and if not, you're going to see it a lot over the next couple days. We think about software development, the software development experience, in many different ways. One of the ways that we think about it is in 3 phases: build, collaborate, deploy. And actually, I think you can make the argument that this is collaboration, right? When you're working on a legal document, I'm not a lawyer, but you write it, you get reviews, and then it becomes whatever it becomes, right? You're working on a movie script. You do the first draft, you do a bunch of reviews, it gets thrown out, you start over, there's 10 years later and the movie hasn't been made. Eventually it gets shipped, right? This is one view of the creative process. And we're very much embracing this at GitHub. We think that this is a very good way to think about software, and an even better way to think about tools that are involved in the software development process. So we're very excited today to announce the launch of something we've been talking about and working on for a long time, which is called our integration directory. So we've partnered with some really awesome development tools in the 3 phases of building, collaborating, and deploying. We've made it super easy for you to find these tools, to read about them, and we've made it even easier for these partners to build and give you an amazing experience. We've always had a really good API. It's always been very open. We've always had, well, not always, but I'm just going to say always. We've always had OAuth for a long time. You've been able to log into GitHub with OAuth. You've been able to use the API. But that's not good enough, right? It's one thing to be able to build an application on top of the GitHub API. It's another thing to have the support of GitHub, the company, to be able to talk to us, to be able to work with us on really deep integration. And it's another thing to have this be an easy experience, right? Why are you going to Google to find out the best CI for Ruby on Rails to use with GitHub? You should be able to go to GitHub and see what the options are. What do other GitHub users use? What do people like me that are building software like me, what do they use to develop? Which ones actually work really well, and which ones are curated and handpicked and selected by GitHub? So now you can do that. We're launching that right now. You can check it out on the blog. If you're interested in building applications with GitHub, we want to work with you. Definitely check it out. And now adding plugins such as Slack, CircleCI, Travis is going to be easier than ever. And this is just the starting point for us. We're investing very heavily in integrations in the ecosystem. And we're just super, super excited to do this because we come from a world, like I said, where we use lots of different tools. There are different ways to use Git. There are different issue trackers. The day we launched GitHub Issues, we had a disable button because we said, we want you to use this. We think it's pretty good. If you want to turn it off and use a different issue tracker, we want to work really well with that. We understand that choice is a very powerful thing for developers. And now we're helping make those choices easier, more prominent, and hopefully higher quality. So we want to work with the best-in-breed tools all over the world to help make your development workflow experience way better. And so the integration directory is a place for us to start doing that, have the conversations, and show you the stuff that we think is awesome. So I'm really excited about that as well. And then I have a third thing I'd like to talk about. So it's hard to imagine that like 10 years ago, we were not using SSL and we were storing our passwords in plain text. I mean, some of you weren't, but a lot of us were, OK? That's absolutely ridiculous. The internet has this naive, misguided design principle that you can trust people, right? And that has not worked out so well. I mean, mostly it's worked out so well. You have about 3 billion people on the internet. But there are some bad actors on there, and really there are some mistakes that people can make. Part of thinking about security is protecting you from someone who wants to do something bad, and part of it is just protecting yourself. Part of it is building in safeguards so you don't make a mistake, so you don't drop a production database, which some people in this room have done, which is me. So there are things that you sometimes want to put in place to help yourself and safeguard yourself. So I think that security is going to become one of the most important topics in software in the next 10 years. And that may sound obvious, but I don't think we've scratched the surface yet. You go to the news, you see every day another Target, another Sony, another Ashley Madison. We're just at the beginning of that, right? Security has not been top of mind for developers. It has not been top of mind for educators. It has not been something that we built into our software. If anything, it's been this scary world of academics and researchers that a lot of new beginners are afraid of and sort of just go with common knowledge. That has to change. We need to get way better at security. Part of it is because, like I said, the internet is getting bigger. Part of it is because it's getting more important, right? We're storing really important source code, really important medical data, really important family photos on the internet. We weren't doing this 20 years ago. We were giving Amazon our credit card in plain text, right? And then they would send us some books. It was way different. So over the next 10 years, security is going to become one of the most important things in technology. And everyone developing needs to think about it. And if you're not thinking about it today, we have some cool stuff to talk about that we hope you'll be excited about. So I would like to make a big announcement and have join me on stage Stina Ahrensvard, CEO and co-founder of Yubico. Thank you.
Some cynics say that the game is over, that the security threats and the breaches we see today are so bad that there is nothing to do about it. I don't agree, and I'm very honored to be here today to share why. A few years ago, I had an online bank where they told me that I could log in with a username password, a software certificate that I downloaded on my computer. With that, my bank account would be hacked. I'm not sorry, that my bank account would be safe. But I happen to know a banker. A hacker, a former hacker. This hacker told me that it would take him a day to write the code, to hack in, and empty my bank account. So, to inform the bank about this security risk, I called them up, and I got a very clear and simple answer on the other side of the line. Please tell your friend to not do that. Well, I saw it as a challenge. I partner with a former hacker who, by the way, never did anything criminal. We developed a YubiKey. It's a small key that you can plug into the USB port of your computer, or you can tap it to your phone. And when you use it, it generates new encrypted passcodes every time you log in. We put the open source code behind this on GitHub. And we ship these keys by selling them online to 150 countries, to developers, to geeks, to political leaders all over the world. And we made it easy for developers like you to take the code and protect your computers, networks, and services. So one day, I got an email from one of the large internet giants here in Silicon Valley. They said they had integrated the key. They thought it was awesome and asked for a quote for 20,000 units. I had not been speaking with them. They already integrated. They already know how it worked. No sales questions asked. At the time, I convinced the former hacker, who's, by the way, the CTO of my company, and also my husband and the father of my 3 children. I convinced him to move here from Stockholm to develop a new open authentication standard. We approached Google, and together with the Google security team and NXP, we developed U2F, Universal Second Factor. U2F enables simple hardware-backed keys, like the YubiKey, to work across any online service. It's based on public key crypto, really strong, great security that protects against Trojans, phishing, man-in-the-middle attacks, but without that whole complexity of readers, client software, drivers, and costly CAs. And this is the secret. It's native support in platform and browsers. It just works out of the box. Just plug and play. And the beauty with this is that when you sign up a key to a service, it generates a new set of encryption secrets that are only stored on that specific service. There is no secrets or personal data shared between the service providers. With that way, we can build a really highly secure and scalable authentication ecosystems where there is not a single service provider or a single database that store your secrets or share your secrets and can be hacked. So, since Google deployed this for all staff and made support in Gmail, they have seen really good stats. It's 4 times faster, 40% support reduction, and a significant fraud reduction compared to the mobile app Google Authenticator. And here today, we have a present for you. This little token that you all got in your conference bags, if you take that and go to that rear corner of this building, you will get one of these for free. And you can sign it up to your Gmail account and your Dropbox account. And from today, this morning, you can also sign it up to your GitHub account. And on GitHub, this fantastic platform that we've used since we started our company, you can also find the U2F code that you can integrate into your own software and services, and the code that you can start to compete with me and build your own devices. So going back to the cynics, great security begins by accepting that we can no longer trust our networks, our software, or our computing devices connected to the internet. It begins by accepting that we can move the trust to a small key that we put in our pocket and that is not connected to the internet, and we build a secure link between the key and the service we want it to connect to. With this, we can build a new, distributed, and highly scalable trust model for the internet. And for you who want to join our forces, there is a security session later today at 2:30, I think. And on this yubico.com/GitHub, you will find the information needed for integrating this into your own software and services. And this is my final word. Remember, the fraudsters have not yet won the game. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Amazing. We're really, really excited to be working with Yubico to announce that today. And GitHub now supports it, but I implore all of you building software, building applications to support it too. Look into it, think about security, take it seriously. It's a huge, huge deal, and it's getting easier. It's getting easier to do the right thing, to be secure, and to beat the fraudsters. So really, really happy, and check out the session later today. All right, I want to talk a little bit about open source. It's kind of a thing that's happening. I don't know if y'all know. There are over 27 million open source projects on GitHub today, right? 3 years ago, there was like 1 million. It's ridiculous. And that's 2012, right? I thought 2012 was the future. There were movies about it, right? I thought that was the end of everything. Turns out it wasn't even the beginning. Open source is growing at a tremendous rate, right? This is just on GitHub, right? It's a big deal. But I'll be honest, I said this a couple times, I don't know what 27 million means. It's just like too big, I don't get it. There's maybe how many people here, 5 million, 6 million? Like it's just too big to even understand or reason about. So what does this mean? What does it look like? What does it actually mean to us as people? Every day, 1,000 people create their first public pull request ever. That's 1,000 people that are contributing to open source for the first time, that are using GitHub, that are helping build software for the first time every single day. That's absolutely incredible. That's new people, right? And then the other side of it, 5,000 different people every single day create their first public repository. There was a point in time not that long ago when there were 5,000 open source projects total. Now that's happening every single day. And I think that there's a lot of reasons for that. I think one of the reasons is the barrier to entry has become so low, and the definition of an open source project has become so broad that now we are encouraged to share everything. The smallest snippet, the little idea, the weekend hack. A couple years ago, a decade ago, it was an onerous task to run, maintain, and publish an open source project. Now it's almost easier to just throw your stuff up on GitHub and forget about it than it is to keep it on your hard drive and let it collect dust. So it's really amazing how open source itself is changing in terms of adoption, numbers, and just what it even means. So I want to share some of my favorite projects that have popped up over the past year or so. And people at GitHub know that I have pretty great taste in weird stuff. So here's the first one. This is called Term UI. It's written in Go. This is a terminal library that lets you create real-time graphs in the terminal. So if you want to recreate war games, if you reject this notion that the developer is changing and want to go back to 1987 or whatever, we've got you, OK? You can work all in the terminal. You can create these on your own. It's an amazing library. I'm a huge fan of it. There's even a map that you can get in it. So highly recommend checking out TermU. This is an amazing open source project. Anyone play StarCraft? Or did they ever? Apologies to Adobe before, apologies to Blizzard now. I don't know if this is cool or not. But someone has recreated StarCraft entirely in HTML and JavaScript and published it on GitHub Pages. So any of you, please don't do it on the Wi-Fi. Any of you can go and play StarCraft in your browser now, a version of it, on GitHub Pages. It's absolutely incredible, right? It's absolutely incredible. Again, sorry, Blizzard, but there's just really cool stuff happening, and a lot of it's just for fun. A lot of it is thought experiments. A lot of it are just new ideas. Not all of it is enterprise-grade software, even though that's a huge part of it as well. And those are fun. And the third one I wanted to talk about is this thing called ACAT. So this is the software that powers the system that Stephen Hawking uses to communicate. I'm sure we've all heard the computer voice that he uses. It's powered by software. It has a very complex input system. It's really fascinating to dive into this to see how exactly he does talk and communicate and what this software does. Intel has created it, and recently they released it open source on GitHub. So this is something that anyone can use now. You can play with. You can contribute to. There's some really, really amazing stuff like this that, while StarCraft is fun, helping people that aren't able to communicate is just absolutely mind-blowing. This is another great example. It's not an enterprise project. This probably may not have been an open source project a decade ago, but now it's available, pushed, and supported by Intel. So those are three things I really like. And of course, there's a lot of other cool stuff going on, too. There's a lot of name brand open source, which in and of itself is an incredible concept that we're in a place where, oh, yeah, Docker. Oh, yeah, Rails. Oh, yeah, MySQL. We know about that. That's real stuff. Everyone uses it. The biggest websites in the world use these applications, these frameworks, these libraries to do open source, and they actually contribute back. This is now just standard operating procedure, as I think we all know. And part of that is the companies are changing. Like I said, thinking of Microsoft doing open source is pretty remarkable. 10 or so years ago, Ballmer said on an earnings call that open source was communism, right? And I don't know what he meant by that exactly, but now Microsoft is a huge proponent of open source, not just on our Visual Studio plugin. Microsoft last September released .NET, which is their basically Java competitor. It's their platform for building enterprise and all sorts of different software. It's been around for over a decade, really awesome. It basically runs a huge chunk of the world. It's now completely open source. It's available on Mac and Linux. And in only the first few months, Microsoft got more contributions from the community than they ever got internally. There are more external, non-Microsoft employees who've contributed to .NET than there are Microsoft employees. That's really amazing. They're actually using open source to further their business goals. It's not just a toy. And the other thing that's really important there, the other nuance that I think we all know, is that it's not just people throwing code at .NET. It's not a Wikipedia model where you go in afterwards and have to remove and censor the edits. Every single contribution to .NET was approved by a Microsoft employee or someone that's on the .NET core team. In many cases, software gets better when it's released as open source because you have to go through the process of documenting the tribal knowledge that you and your coworkers have sort of known. You can't just go to Bob or go to Susan anymore. You have to write it down and make it something that anyone in the world can read, understand. That forces you to think. That forces you to talk about what are the contributions, what are our standards. So open source is really, I think, elevating the craft of software development and the quality. At the same time, it's helping companies further their business goals, and it's giving us stuff like StarCraft in the browser. So I don't know what this is. I think it's a microchip or a transistor. I've never been much of a hardware person. But I was recently lucky enough to see Gordon Moore at a fireside chat of Moore's Law, and Tom Friedman was the interviewer of The World is Flat, which is an awesome book. And Gordon must be in his late 70s or 80s at this point. I mean, Moore's Law is decades old. And the interview was, you know, how did you come up with Moore's Law? What were you thinking at the time? How were you so damn correct about everything? If you look at the original Moore's Law article that he wrote for like Hardware Magazine or something, he talks about having computers on your watches. He talks about carrying around computers and connecting to everyone in the world. He talks about having information at your fingertips. It's all this stuff that came true, and it's really, really remarkable. And Tom Friedman asked him, what has surprised you? He said, social networks. He's like, I didn't think people would use computers just to chat, share baby photos, but that seems to be the number one thing. And I think that's sort of funny, but there's something core to that, right? Computers connect us. hardware brings people closer together. The internet is so magical because it really connects the world. And that's a lot of what Tom Friedman wrote about in his book, The World is Flat. So Friedman asked Moore, what's next? What's the next Moore's Law? And Gordon Moore, who's really funny and all this, was like, don't ask me. Like, I have no idea. Go ask someone young. But he said something that really struck me. He said, we just seen the beginning of what computers can do for us. And this is a guy that invented Moore's Law, and he's watched it come true over decades and decades and decades. He's watched science fiction become reality, and he thinks we haven't even scratched the surface yet. He can't predict what's going to happen in the future, but he knows we haven't even started. And when he says computer, he doesn't mean desktop software or desktop hardware, right? He doesn't mean mainframe. He means anything that's run by programming, anything that's run by software or some sort of embedded hardware device. We've just seen the beginning of really what software, hardware, and technology can do for us. I think the last century, the 20th century, you could make the argument it was all about hardware. Planes, cars, assembly lines, computer chips. There was a lot of amazing innovations in hardware that transformed the way we all live. And a lot of that was here before we were born, and it's just become more and more miraculous since we've been alive. That's changing now. It used to be that the constraint was on processing speed, right? We couldn't get enough processors. We couldn't get enough bandwidth. That's not the case anymore. I bet some people here have spun up AWS instances in this talk or created a new DigitalOcean thing. You can get hardware. You can get CPUs. It's not that difficult anymore, and that's becoming more and more ubiquitous. What's cheap for us now is becoming even cheaper for everyone else in the world. So the constraint is no longer hardware, or it's quickly becoming not the main constraint. Well, what is it? That's why we're here. It's software. Software is now the constraint. The lack of software, the lack of ability to produce effectively and efficiently software, the lack of speed behind creating new software, of turning ideas into reality, that's the constraint. And that's only going to get worse. The more hardware we have, the cheaper it is for computers to be in every part of our lives, from light bulbs to our smoke machines, the more we're going to need software. We don't have enough, right? We think there are 20 million developers. I'm skeptical. It's not nearly enough. As I said before, there are only 3 billion people on the internet. Only. That's less than half the world. What happens when there are 7 billion people on the internet? They're going to want a lot more software. We're not equipped to deal with that. We don't have enough software already. We all know about the tech job market. It's only going to get worse as software permeates into every single corner of the globe. I really think that software is going to become the biggest driver of change in human history. And I think if you look at the last century and you looked at 1915 compared to 1999, we're in 1915 right now. We have no idea. We can't even predict. The Moore's Law won't even be invented for the next 20, 25, 30 years, right? We have no idea what it's going to do. But I do think that we have not even seen the beginning of what software is going to do for us. And what's interesting is that when you want more software, you can't just build a bigger factory. You can't just add another assembly line. You can't just outsource it to a bigger machine, right? The only way you can get more software is through people. You either have a person that writes more better code or less better code, or you have more people writing software. The only way to get more software right now that we know about until the AI thing happens is people. So it's really coming quite fascinating that the last century was about hardware, and this century is about people. More and more, I think, as software and hardware permeates our lives, as the menial tasks get automated away, it really is going to unlock the true potential of humans, right? Our creativity is the thing that we can't outsource to robots right now. We can outsource lifting boxes, right? We can outsource all sorts of stuff. We can't outsource creativity. We may never be able to, but we need that. We need your brains. We need as many brains as possible working on software, helping us build the future of the world, and not just in San Francisco, not just in North America, every single corner of the globe. So this fills me with a lot of hope, and it makes me really excited, because I actually think humanity is going to become more human as we embrace technology in the future, because software is driven by human ingenuity and creativity. And really, that's why we're here, right? This conference isn't about GitHub. It's about you. It's about the people building software, and more importantly, it's about why you're doing it, who you're building it for, right? We're all trying to make the world a better place, one line of code at a time. We're trying to make our experience better. We're trying to make our analytics better. We're trying to make our customers' experience better. We are building the future of the world, whether we know it or not, and not in a let's make a dent in the universe sense, in the sense of there are going to be 100 million software developers in the future. There are going to be way more people that want to be writing software. There is no end to the world's thirst and hunger for software, and we still don't know what the hell we're doing. right? Well, that's why we're here. We're here to talk about how do you build software? How do you collaborate? Which tools are your favorite? We are just at the beginning of this industry that's going to be the most transformative thing the world has ever seen. I'm super excited about it. So that's why we're here. It's about you. It's about people you're building software for. And it's about people, right? So over the next few days, meet some awesome people, share ideas, tweet about good talks you see, think about it, play the StarCraft game, sorry Blizzard, and then go home and build something absolutely kick-ass. Because at the end of the day, that's why we're here, right? We're all here to build stuff. We're all here to do great things. We're all here to work better with other people. And we're all here to make the world a little bit better place. And in the future, when we look back on 2015 and we are so embarrassed by the tools we used, it's not going to be someone else that got us to this miraculous new world where software is running everything. It's going to be the people in this room and everyone you interact with. We are the future. Our community is the future. It's in our hands. We can either wait and see what happens, or we can be proactive and we can make it the future we want to make it. So as you think about software, as you think about documentation, as you think about lines of code, remember that what we're doing is a really big deal, and what happens next is totally, totally up to us. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you have an awesome, awesome conference, and welcome to GitHub Universe, everyone. Thank you.